Welcome back to Spotlight. I'm Edgewenka, and I'm here with Jim Dyers, and he's from Seattle, out of Seattle, and he's here with the Ministry of Health and Social Development to help us to build capacity, community capacity in the Virgin Islands. Welcome, Jim.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here. Yeah, good to meet you.
Welcome to the BVI.
Thanks so much.
Yeah. You're here, of course, as a consultant with the Ministry of Health. Tell us a little bit about that first.
That's right. Yeah, so I was invited to come out, and I think part of it is there's a recognition that to deal with the non-communicable diseases, that there's a role for community. They developed a whole series of strategies for how to deal with those diseases, and it turns out that most of the things that are on their strategy list can best be done by community rather than by professionals. So there were things like getting people to do healthy eating, doing more fitness, creating better, more walkable communities, reducing alcoholism. All those things can be best done by community. And so they brought me in not as an expert on non-communicable disease, because I'm not. My field is community. I'm just passionate about building community. So I came in really to talk about how do we get people engaged? How do we really get broad community engagement so that we can deal with that issue, but also all the other issues that are facing our society? How do we mobilize communities around issues like safety? How do we mobilize communities around issues like global warming? How do we mobilize people around issues like social justice? The community is really the key to everything we care about, not just health.
And I was going to say how you mobilize people to take responsibility for their health.
That's right. Yeah. That's right.
And that's got to be a challenge, particularly here in the BVI. I don't know how you're finding it so far, but getting people involved.
That's right.
People who have become comfortable in their lifestyle.
That's right.
Who have never heard some of the things that about maintaining wellness before.
Right.
You grew up in a culture where the foods that you eat have been traditional.
Right.
And you're accustomed to eating that way. And for someone to come and say, listen, that's not the right way to eat.
Right.
That must be quite a change for any community to go through. How do you get a community to understand those things?
Well, I think it's a paradigm shift, not just for the community, but it's also a big change for government to think in a new way. Because in many ways, I think the reason communities aren't stepping up is because government hasn't stepped back. And people are so used to having government do everything for them that they've forgotten about their capacity to do for themselves. And recognizing there's a role for government, but there's also some things communities do better than government. And there's a role for people. And that when people complain to government about the youth problem, for example, the question is, whose youth are they?
Right.
And isn't a community in a better position to raise the young people than government is? And in the same way, communities in a better position to take care of their own health than government. So recognizing there's a role for government, but also people starting to recognize there's also a role for community.
And how do we get them to understand the role and recognize that role?
Yeah. Some of it is reflecting on how are things going now. Is it working? Has it been working for the past few years? And if you look at the rates here, the number of people who are on dialysis has greatly increased locally.
Yeah.
The diets have changed dramatically here over the years. People used to be very fit. And the level of obesity has gone up, not because people are not following the traditional diets, but because they're taking the new diets of Coca-Cola and the sugary drinks and consuming more salt.
Yes.
So people are starting to recognize that the current ways we're doing things aren't working. And people are realizing that both in government and community. I think another thing that's happened is the economic crisis. And we don't have the same resources we have in government and in the nonprofits that we used to have. And so starting to recognize the community's got lots of underutilized resources that's just sitting there. Right?
What talk to us about some of those resources, because
they're phenomenal.
I remember speaking with a social marketer who was here before. He was a consultant as well, and he was talking about the infrastructure, some of the already existing infrastructure that we have. That we don't look at those things as resources.
Well, so the key resource are the people, right? And I think recognizing that every person has something to contribute to their community. Everybody's got gifts. They got knowledge, they got skills, they got passions. And too oftentimes we put labels on most of our community that label them not by their gifts, but by what they're missing. So we use terms like disabled and poor person and non-English speaking
So the language got
and old people and at-risk youth and just, homeless, on and on and on, so that most of our population now is labeled not by what they have, but by what they're missing. And if we just focus on what people are missing, they become clients in a service system. We focus on people's gifts, they become citizens in our community. So one of the key resources we can tap are all those individuals in our community who are just waiting to contribute their gifts. Right?
So you identify the resources.
That's right. That's one resource. Another resource is underutilized physical and natural resources in our community. Incredible. I just, driving around, see all the buildings here, some dilapidated buildings, some vacant lots. They could become wonderful resources for the community. The vacant lot that could become a community garden or become a pocket park for the community, or that could become affordable housing. So it's about thinking about some of those problems in a new way. And it's thinking about the local economy. How do we build an economy around the strengths of the people, rather than just look at bringing in outside money, outside resources? How do we build a community-based economy where people really benefit from the economy?
Okay. So when you talk about the physical resources when it comes to maintaining wellness, what's some of the things that have you been able to identify some of those things already?
Some of the things people can do to maintain wellness?
Well, the physical infrastructure.
Okay. One of the key things
we need to be active.
Right. One of the key things, for example, is being active. And one of the problems I see around here is that it's very auto-oriented. It's very, I've been walking around, and part of it is I'm used to driving on the right side of the road, so I'm always looking the wrong way when I'm trying to cross the street. But even if you know which way to look, it's pretty scary. It's not very pedestrian friendly around here. So people, and the traffic jams are incredible. I can't believe how much traffic there is for such a small place. So how do we make it easier for people to get around by foot, by bicycle, so they actually get exercise, right? That's one key.
Right.
How do we create more places where people can do physical activity? That's key. I think a second thing is food. And what I've read is that food is pretty expensive here, fresh produce, even though you have the best environment for growing food. So what can we do to create more community agriculture? How can we have more farmers markets, create community gardens, create opportunities for urban agriculture? It's a great way for people to get some income, great way to build the local economy, and a great way to improve people's health, to make that food more affordable. So there's lots of things you could do to improve the physical environment that would also improve people's health.
Yeah. I know, for example, the strategy for the prevention of non-communicable diseases involve setting up communities in various areas.
That's right.
In order to spearhead the thrust towards wellness maintenance.
Yeah.
One of the challenges that those communities are having, of course, is involvement.
That's right. That's right.
Participation of the community itself.
Right.
Yeah. How do we motivate a community who's been sedentary for one thing for many years, being taken care of, as you mentioned, for another number of years, and really don't have that desire, that drive to come out and participate and contribute.
Right.
How do we get those people
So
motivated?
I've been meeting with people at all levels. I met with the elected leaders of your country. I met with civil servants. I've met with community members on the health and wellness committees. And key messages I've tried to give are that this requires a major paradigm shift for both government and community. And that part of the problem is we can't just go out and push a health agenda. The key is to start to listen to the people and find out what's important to the people. Have them identify their own priorities and start enabling people to organize around what's important to them. And it might not be health. It might be around we want to create some sports activities. We might want to improve the physical infrastructure of our neighborhood. It might be that we want to look for more employment opportunities. It might be that we want to help support our young people. But if you think about it, every one of those things actually improves health.
Yes.
But rather than start with the government's agenda and start by saying we want to bring you together around non-communicable disease, a lot of people don't even know what that is, right? It's not their language. So I find a basic principle of organizing is to start with what the people care about, what they're passionate about, and then remind them about the people are also feeling very powerless. So it's starting to share some stories about what's possible when people come together as a community. I think the story you have here locally of Noel Lloyd and the whole positive action movement is a great illustration about what's possible. You know, first day I came, I went to that park and it just inspired.
Okay.
You know, mobilize people to hold government accountable, make sure the land stayed with the people. That shows the power of the people. So kind of reminding us about what is the power of the community, what can the people do best. Reminding us from history, reminding us from local examples about what does community do best. And sharing some of those stories to inspire people about what's possible.
Okay. And what kind of organizational structures then would be required to help to bring those people?
I think the organizations are already there. I think just about everybody belongs to some kind of association. And we need to recognize the ways people are already organized into sporting groups, into faith-based organizations, school-based groups, service organizations. You know, I know you guys have active Rotaries and Lions, women's groups, youth groups, neighborhood watches. There are hundreds and hundreds of associations in this community. And start to tap those and start bringing them together around shared interests, develop a common vision for the future of their community, and really let the people help set the agenda rather than always setting the agenda from on high, from the bureaucrats or from the elected officials. Start at a very local level, at the community level, and have the community develop their own vision. And when they own the vision, they're much more likely to be involved in helping to implement that vision.
Okay. What kind of facilitation will we need then to get that started, to get the people, those organizations to become a part of the new paradigm?
Yeah, there's lots of ways to do it. One of the ways we did it in Seattle is we said part of the problem getting people engaged is every agency is trying to engage them around their own agenda. So people are just being stretched every direction. Some people are trying to involve people around sustainability, some around health, some around safety, some around resilience, some around, everybody's got their own agenda. And people are just being stretched every direction. So let's step back. Let's work as one government rather than as many separate departments and just support the community around what their priorities are. So one idea that we came up with in Seattle is we have one coordinator who works out of local government and works at a community level, works in the neighborhood with all the different associations to help connect them, to help them meet each other, to build the relationships, and then helps connect them with the city resources to help implement the community strategies.
Okay.
So that it starts with the community rather than with government. A second resource we put in place was a program we called the Neighborhood Matching Fund. And we provide a cash match to any group of neighbors that wants to come together to initiate a project that will benefit the community. Mm-hmm. And we just fund one-time projects because we want to build capacity rather than creating dependence. Mm-hmm. And all the funding decisions are made by the neighborhood leaders themselves. And the community's match can be volunteer labor. Through that program, more than 5,000 self-help projects have happened in Seattle over the last 25 years. Mm-hmm. 85 organic community gardens, new parks, every playground's been redeveloped by the community, public art all over the city developed by neighbors, renovating facilities, all done by community.
And the role of the government would be?
The role of the government in this case was get out of the way. Mm-hmm. Because in many ways, government can provide a lot of obstacles to community action. There's always health and safety issues. There's issues around liability. There's issues around maintenance. There's issues around unions. So how do you start saying yes to people rather than always using that as an excuse to say, no, you can't do it. We have to have professionals do the work, right? So that was one of the keys. Mm-hmm. Second one is providing a little bit of funds as an incentive for people to do the projects and to provide the resources that the community can't provide themselves. And the coordinator was also key because the coordinator has their ear to the ground and hears what the people's dreams are, what their concerns are, because the people we're trying to reach, get involved, aren't the people who are looking for money. These are just neighbors. They aren't NGOs, it's just neighbors. And to help them start to think about what they can do as a community.
Yeah, one of the challenges that we have is that everybody is working now and trying to meet their obligations.
That's right.
Trying to get their children through school. A lot of personal not agendas, but personal responsibilities.
Yeah.
And the personal responsibilities make it difficult for volunteerism. Because you're so focused on what you have to do to survive that is difficult now to extend yourself.
Right, I understand.
How do we manage that sort of situation?
And that's a problem that's all over the world, right? People are spending more and more time working and have less and less time to devote to community. Robert Putnam, a professor at Harvard University, wrote a book called Bowling Alone that talks just about that problem and the breakdown of community life. And yet we need community now more than we've ever needed it. It's not an old-fashioned idea. So it's about how do we find new ways to engage people. Part of it, Robert Putnam said the biggest thing breaking down community is television. I hate to say that here. But he said people spend an average of 3 or 4 hours a day in front of the television
I think
set.
we recognize that.
Right?
Yeah.
So people have time. It's just a question of how they choose to use their time. Right?
And then we could use...
And so it's about how do we make community life more engaging. And usually the only way we choose to involve community is by having meetings. And meetings are the worst way to involve community. Right? They're boring. People don't see results.
So we need more action.
More action. Projects, social, block parties. Just ways to get people starting to connect with each other. And actually community can be a way to make yourself much more efficient. Because you can start having joint child care, where you have a child care cooperative, and you can take turns watching after each other's kids, rather than everybody have to take care of their own kids all the time, right? Where you can do bulk buying so that things are less expensive, where you can share skills, trade skills with one another. All kinds of things you can do as a community that actually makes your life easier. Yeah. It doesn't have to make it more difficult.
But we would have to be educated in that process, wouldn't we? I mean, because I don't know how much of us really... dig deep into that.
It's not rocket science. It's not rocket science. A lot of it is.
But you still have to be aware of what those options are and what the possible is.
So today I just did a workshop for 3 hours and just shared some stories about what's happening all over the world, and it just light bulbs go off for people, and people say, "Hey, that's the way we used to do things here."
Yes, I was.
This isn't like a new concept. Like we're going to take care of each other. Yeah. That's not like.
It used to be where the village raised a child.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. That's right.
And we look out after each other.
Yeah.
So it's not a foreign.
That's right. That's right. And I think in many ways you get it here better than we get it in most places in the world, because you still have community here. Most other places in the world, everything's been split apart. People go one place to work, they go another place to shop, they go another place to, their lives are just spread out all over the place. They go sleep in another place. And here, everything happens in a place. People, and every place else, people are always on the move. They're always going to another city, another country. Here, why would you want to move? You got the best place in the world. So people stay. Yeah. And when you have that kind of stability, it's much easier to build community than it is in other places.
How important is legislation, government legislation, in the building of community? Is that something that we need to be paying attention to as well?
Government legislation?
Yeah.
Well, I think some of it is, I think it's less about legislation. It's more about policies and about the attitude of elected officials and bureaucrats. And it's about recognizing that some decisions are best made at a very local level. So in Seattle, for example, we create comprehensive plans for the city as a whole, done out of government with lots of consultation with the community. But then we develop neighborhood plans that are developed by the community themselves, where they hire their own planner who's accountable to the community. But we only allow them to do that once they brought everybody together. That was a huge change in policy for our city, but it paid huge dividends because then people actually owned the plans. And they held government accountable for implementation and took a lot of responsibility for implementation themselves.
So, when you talk about the community hiring people it would have to be some sort of legal entity that's formed within the community. With the ability to raise money, with the ability to hire and pay and loan and.
So that was part of that's one of the issues we face, because the people we're trying to involve aren't necessarily part of a nonprofit organization. So what we did is we teamed them up with a nonprofit that can serve the residents.
So you have a community board. What kind of organizational structure?
Okay, good.
What kind of organizational structure would we need to have the community functioning on that level?
So one of the things we did is in the city of Seattle divided it up into 13 areas, and we have a little city hall for each area so people can access city services right in their own neighborhood rather than having to go downtown. And they can access all services in one place from all levels of government. So you can apply for a passport in your own neighborhood rather than having to go to the federal building. You can get a bus pass, even though that's a different layer of government. And for each little city hall, we have a coordinator, somebody who really knows government inside and out and also knows the community inside and out. They often call themselves overt double agents. Really clear they're working for both government and the community, and their job is just to bring the two together. And they're the ones who are able to start bringing all the different factions in the community together, because it's not like there's one community. There's business interests, there's homeowners, there's tenants, there's new immigrants, there's youth, there's elders, all different faiths. So all of these different interests, and they're able to start bringing them together around a table. So they meet every month bringing all the associations in the community together so they can start to meet each other, develop consensus, work towards a common future.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm having a conversation with Jim Dyers. He's here in the BVI to help to build capacity in communities, as we've been hearing, an interesting discussion around how do you develop and motivate the people in the community to take responsibility for themselves, not just their health, but everything in the community. We're going to take a break for a word from our sponsors. We're going to come right back and continue the discussion. I'm going to open up the phones. If anybody wants to call, the numbers will come up on the screen. You can call and make a comment, ask a question, help me out here with some of the questioning. So keep it locked right here, the Spotlight. We'll be right back after these words from our sponsors.
Spotlight is brought to you by Tortola Concrete Limited and H. Lavity South Community College.
Welcome back to Spotlight. I'm here with Jim Dyers. He's here in the Virgin Islands to talk about building capacity in the communities, to get communities to take responsibility for their own development. It's quite an interesting conversation we're having. Hope you're enjoying it. The phone numbers are on the screen. They're going to pop up any minute now. There you go. So you can text me or you can call. And if you want to make a contribution to the discussion, feel free to do so. If you want to ask a question, that's fine as well. We were talking about the organization of the community, the support that communities can give to themselves, government can give to the communities, and industry partners.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, to me, a real major challenge in the community is that businesses, I get the sense that businesses need to recognize more of their stewardship.
Yeah.
In the community.
Yeah.
And see themselves as the body that's providing food, clothing, and shelter for the community, and with that provision, there's a certain level of responsibility to see that, for example, education is really effective and efficient.
Right.
Crime is non-existent.
Yeah.
Young people meaningfully engaged.
Yeah.
And I don't see the business community taking that stewardship.
Yeah.
How do we get them to understand their role in the community? And I often talk about a symbiotic relationship between government, labor, and business.
Right. Yeah, I often talk, and I think there's different levels of business. So I often talk about the symbiotic relationship between small businesses and neighborhoods.
Yes.
And oftentimes in Seattle, historically there'd been a division between the two. They didn't like each other, they didn't get along, but largely it's because they didn't know each other. So when we started bringing them together and started meeting each other, they realized they had a lot of common interests. And they realized that symbiotic relationship, that the businesses couldn't survive unless they had customers, and the customers couldn't have a good neighborhood without a business district. The business district is absolutely essential. That's where your bumping places are, where you meet your neighbors. It's where you get your identity. You know, it's where you get jobs. It's where you get your services. Yeah, it's pretty key to your neighborhood. And so they started realizing they had a symbiotic relationship. So they started doing all kinds of joint projects together. It was really exciting. And you could see how communities really could bring value to the business district. My business district in Columbia City had been totally boarded up because all the businesses had left as the mall got created. People were shopping out in the mall, out in the suburbs.
Yes.
Right? So we lost our business district. And as we lost more and more businesses, more and more crime moved into the district, and we lost the rest of the businesses. We finally lost our supermarket, and we lost our theater.
We had more business. You lost the people, and the community died.
Oh, the community was dead. I mean, it brought all kinds of crime in. We had prostitution, drug dealing, gang activity, dangerous. People were afraid to live in the neighborhood. So the neighbors said, we got to revive this. So they came up with incredible strategies. They started up a farmer's market on the parking lot of the boarded up supermarket. That started all with volunteers and started bringing people back in. They took a boarded up church and turned it into a cultural center to surround their young people with the arts. Started bringing people in for performances. They started doing beat walk, where they had different music in each of the restaurants at night to give people the confidence to come out at night and listen to music and meet their neighbors. They took an old boarded up storefront and they turned it into a bike shop. And the community renovated it themselves. They got people to donate their used bicycles that hadn't worked for years. And they train at-risk youth how to fix the bicycles. And every kid that graduates from the program earns a bicycle. And they formed a bicycle club to do regular bike rides around the neighborhood. Now they fix so many bicycles through that program. Hundreds of kids have earned their own. They donate bicycles to homeless families, to foster kids. They're sending bicycles to the people of Africa every year. Despite all this, there was one block in this district was stayed boarded up for 20 years. They couldn't get any business to come in. Finally, somebody said, look, if we can't get real businesses, let's pretend. I said, what kind of business would you like? Somebody said, I want an ice cream store. Somebody else said, I want a toy store. Somebody else said, I want a bookstore. Painted that entire block to make it look like they were real businesses. Painted the boarded up doors and windows to make it look like there were businesses inside. People got excited. Cars were stopping. People wanted to get out and shop. Within a year, we had to take down every one of the murals because real businesses wanted to get in on the action. You go to Columbia City today, there's not one empty storefront. They're building new mixed-use development to keep up with demand, and it all came from the neighbors. They're the ones who revived the business district. It wasn't the businesses.
Yeah.
But I also see businesses have responsibilities. So how do you get businesses to start employing people from the community?
Yes.
Right? And see their responsibility to the community and realize it's a symbiotic relationship. Just as the businesses are dependent on the community is dependent on the businesses.
Yeah.
So we've got businesses now, they're stepping up. We have a case in White Center, very multicultural community, low income, where the community came together to develop their own plan for what they wanted to see happen in the community. And then we pulled together a partners group, which were all the agencies and businesses, including the vice president of the Boeing Airlines, airplane company, sit there and figure out how are we going to help implement the community's vision. So Boeing is providing job training to people in that community so they can get jobs, high-paying jobs in the airline industry, right? That's one example.
It seems to me that education is going to be a major part of capacity building.
That's right.
And,
That's right.
And
That's right.
And when I say education, I don't necessarily mean math and science and arithmetic. I'm talking about the knowledge of how communities are built.
Yeah.
And the responsibility of the individual, the responsibility of the business, the responsibility of the employee, and the responsibility of the government.
Right.
All of these, we need to, I think, perhaps learn. I mean, I don't see it. I don't see us as knowing that. I mean, I don't know what impression you've gotten so far. But is that something you think that needs to be focused on so that we get to understand how a community is structured and our roles as individuals in a community?
So there's lots of training that's provided for staff in government, in nonprofit organizations, in business. Very little training that's provided for community volunteers who just want to make a difference.
Yes.
That's part of what I loved about what the Ministry of Health is doing here is they've asked me to meet with community members as well. We have high expectations of community, and yet we don't give them the tools to be successful.
That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Or the training in schools, you know, for students about civic education. Doesn't happen enough. So we need to make that more of a priority. On the other hand, I don't think it takes a lot of classes. It doesn't take a lot of education. This isn't rocket science. Just helping people start to think about what are their strengths and how can they build on it, helping people realize what their capacity is, and then just start doing it. Sometimes we overthink this stuff. We just need to roll up our sleeves and start doing it, you know?
And overcome the obstacles as they pop up.
And I think you play a huge role in this. I think the media can be incredibly helpful with this. And the problem with most of the mainstream media is they tend to focus on all the problems in the community. And then people start thinking of that as the norm.
That the community is nothing but problems.
That's right.
You never see the positive.
And those stories about what community people are doing, and they're everywhere. There's great stories here.
Yes.
And if you get those stories out, it inspires people, reminds people about their capacity again. And then people step up to do it. That's all you need to do is get those stories out. So I appreciate what you're doing. I just want you to do more of it.
Well, I mean, I'm glad you raised that point because that is really, I'm finding that to be really a challenge here with the media, how we we are so negative. We are turning the country into one big negative ball.
That's true.
You know, and it's very, very, very,
very
painful.
Sells,
it's all about, and that's another issue that you mentioned. How do we see service to the community? And I have this thought that as a business person, for example, that you identify a need in the community, you provide that need at the best way you can. Your service, the quality of the product, and you provide that service the best way you can, and the community rewards you.
That's right. That's right.
You know,
Yep.
as opposed to say, let me see where I could make money from.
That's right.
We
It's all about the relationship.
Yeah. Instead, we build relationships with our community instead of just looking to see what we can get out of our community.
That's right.
You know, is that old JFK thing? Ask what you can do for your country, not what your country can do for you.
That's right. That's right.
And how do we, you know, I mean, it seems to me that we need to start thinking that way, and that's a way that we haven't been thinking.
People to volunteer. And I argue that we need fewer volunteers.
Okay.
What we need is more citizens. And what volunteers are people who are volunteering for agencies in services and programs that are important. But what really gets people engaged is when they take their own initiatives and act more like citizens. And the difference is volunteers are helping somebody. And as citizens, it's more about reciprocity. It's about business helping community, community helping business, about individuals helping each other, recognizing everybody's got gifts and everybody has needs. And community is about supporting each other's needs with each other's gifts. The importance
of each other's relationships.
That's right. That's right. It's not like we have some people here with the gifts and other people with the needs who are the clients, and now these people with the gifts are going to help these poor people with the needs. We all have needs. We all have gifts. We're all part of a community.
Yeah. And I mean, part of the problem that I'm seeing is that perhaps we don't know what a community ought to be.
Yeah. I think that's hard. I think over time we've started to develop many different communities. It used to be our community all happened in one place because we would do business, work, go to school, recreation, go to worship. All in the same place, in the same neighborhood, same town, same village. And now we've created single purpose places where we might commute an hour to work. So we've got a workplace community.
Yes.
And then we might drive a half hour to the mall to shop. And we don't have any community there because we don't bump into the same people there. We bump into a bunch of strangers. And, you know, you might, so in a sense, the community is a little more of a challenge now.
Yes.
And we have some communities that are less place-based and more based on culture, for example, new immigrant communities. So those are challenges. But I still think the community of place there's no substitute for it.
And then, of course, the ability to move around quickly from place to place.
That's right.
So when we used to have to walk to buy something, go down to the corner store, go down to the community store, we no longer have to do that. We jump in the car and we go to town.
Or worse, we jump online. Yeah. Right?
Yeah, that's
and people talk about my online community, my social community. And I saw this great Facebook cartoon once, and it's two people sitting in the funeral parlor, and you know, the casket's there, and the one turns to the other and says, "I don't understand why more people aren't here. He has 2,000 friends on Facebook." So, you know, social media can be a great thing to reinforce personal relationships. It just can't be a substitute.
Yes.
When you talk about virtual communities, it's
ridiculous.
Yeah, it
doesn't work.
Yeah. Like your virtual friends are going to come help you out when the hurricane happens? I don't think so.
That's right.
They're on the other side of the world.
That's interesting. Jim, it's been a real pleasure.
Oh, it's been great.
Any messages you want to leave? Anything I forgot to ask that you want to get out?
I just want to remind people about what a special place you have. I think sometimes people may take it for granted because you live here. It's spectacular. And what I really loved is people's passion for this place, but also for each other. And I think this is an incredible opportunity for people to step up and remember that strength of community. This really is a special thing here. And about how do we reinforce that? How do we bring that back where it's been lost? How do we help bring our young people back into our community and really support each other and become a model for how to do that for the rest of the world? Because I think this is the place where it's most likely to happen.
The opportunity is here.
It's great people, you know, and you still have that sense of community. And don't take it for granted because people are losing it in other places. And you need to hold on to it and recognize, yes, there's a role for government, but there's no substitute for community.
Yeah, that'd be the last word.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Thank you for being my guest on Spotlight.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Pleasure to be here.
Yes. Yes, fascinating conversation with Jim Dyers, here to talk about building capacity for communities. Real interesting stuff. And of course, Spotlight will be rebroadcast Tuesdays, Sunday afternoon at 2:30. And any part of the program that you miss, you can certainly go online and call it up on demand. So I hope you take advantage of the opportunity to really look at this discussion and start thinking about the way we can build our community. We've been talking about it for a long time. The opportunity is here, and we really need to step up to the plate. Next week, the Spotlight is hoping to be on the tourist board. Of course, you know, we just had the Alligator Lobster Fest. It's going to be, I'm sure, some assessment of some of the things that happened, some of the things that need to be improved, some things that need to be strengthened, and how we can make it better for next year. It's promising to be an annual event. We are hoping to get more overseas visitors to come and participate in the event. So we hope to be marketing internationally. So we want to tweak it so that when people come and our visitors come, they can enjoy it as much as we do. So we're hoping to have members of the Tourist Board come by next Tuesday. It'll be our last program for the holiday season. Again, Spotlight is seen Tuesdays at 8 p.m. here on JTV Channel 55, and we broadcast on Sundays at 2:30. We stream live on jtvlive.net, and of course, you can also check out all the Spotlights that I've said that you've missed. Thank you for watching. Thank you for your words of encouragement. Continue to email me at jtvspotlight@yahoo.com. I'm Ed Juenka, reminding you that when the spotlight is on, you see the facts. Peace and blessings.
Spotlight is brought to you by the National Bank of the Virgin Islands, the BVI Tourist Board, and CCT Global Communications.